At the museum, the wonderful exhibits that this show has attracted, obviously you want to see, but bear in mind that the museum is open all the year round, and if you enjoy yourself here and you consider joining as a friend of the museum, it's very reasonable, and for your membership you get free admission on 364 days of the year, including all of the special events, and it would take just over 3 visits to recoup your membership, so it's well worth doing it, as it includes all of the special events as well. And we'll tell a little bit more about what the museum does a bit later on. But do go beyond the rally field here, the show field, and have a look at all the wonderful exhibits there. Refreshment area up here has got every single thing you could possibly wish for. Filled rolls, hog roast, bratwurst, the German sausages, beautiful bratwurst sausages there. Seafood, quiches, pizzas, everything you could think of. Cakes, honeycomb cakes. Chinese, everything's there, so do pop in and have a look, or go into the tea tent if you want to sit quietly. But back now to Brian. I can see the only steam vehicle that I can identify is the Central steam wagon from HMS Salt. The only reason I know that is that it passed me going down the Titston bypass onto the occasion a few years ago at a speed that I don't believe possible from the steamer, but they tell me with the Salt and apprentices rebuilding that thing every year or every 2 years, it did pass me at the speed I thought it did. Over to you, Brian.
Right, the first one leads them in. This one's been in the Snowden family for a great number of years. Originally up in the Midlands, and then hence the name Midland Rolling and Haulage Company up on the canopy there, and then came down to live in this part of the country, and she's been running around here, and it's a Tasker. The old Tasker tractor. Taskers were built at Andover in Hampshire. Probably most of you, if you're lorry drivers, may remember the old Tasker trailers, articulated trailers that the company used to build. But quite a small little engine, Tasker Little Giant. It's one of the smaller engines they produce, and very useful in a light haulage engine. HMS Sultan, the Super Sentinels were built at Shrewsbury. The works is still there, although the company's long gone. The building's still there. They had an office block there with an archway between the 2 office blocks. And every time a new engine left the factory, it stopped underneath this archway and had its photograph taken. So there's a brilliant record of every Sentinel that's ever been produced up in Shropshire. This particular one, HMS Sultan down at Gosport, is the School of Naval Marine Engineering, and it's been on the rally scene for a great number of years. It's looked after by staff there and volunteers, and some civilians as well help look after this piece of machinery. It's been on the rally scene, as I say, virtually as long as I can remember seeing it around. When it ended its commercial life, it did end up more or less in the scrapyard, but was saved by a gentleman down in Kent called Chris Lambert, and he eventually sold it to a Wingham Engineering Company down near Canterbury, and they actually fully restored it, because many of you can remember back we had the Suez crisis when they blockaded the Suez Canal, and we thought we weren't going to get any oil from the Arab countries, and we were going to run out of oil. Before we had our own in the North Sea or anything like that. But of course the Suez crisis was averted, so it's never actually used. It was going to go back into commercial use, and it never did. It was then put on loan to HMS Sultan down at Gosport, and then eventually they purchased it and look after it as they do today. The other wagon, again another Sentinel, this one started its working life up in Scotland. The AEW is the Aberdeen Electric Works, and it was used by the company up there, Aberdeen Corporation Electricity Works, and it was used by the company up there. It's got a tipping body on it, and it was used for carrying coal to the electricity works. The Sentinel company, they built quite a number of steam tipping lorries. This one is what we call a one-way tipper. It only tips out over the back, but they also produced a 3-way tipper as well. and by removing various pins along the side of it, you could actually use the same hydraulic ram underneath to actually tip it to the left or right, as well as going out the back. But this is a rear tip only. It was only really Sentinel and Foden were the main people that built steam wagons, and those were the two that were the most successful. But the Sentinel had the advantage, this particular one here, the Aberdeen Corporation one, that can keep up quite well with modern traffic. It's got a vertical boiler in the cab, same as the Sultan has, except theirs is at the front of the cab and the later one is at the back, and an underfloor steam engine driving the back axle on pneumatic tyres, although originally the HMS Sultan one was on solid tyres, but it went back to the Sentinel works in its working days to be changed to pneumatics. And so they were very, very reliable. The Foden company stayed with what we call the locomotive type boiler, which is the boiler rather like the Tasker, where you've got the firebox at the back. The boiler is that round bit which goes from the back of the engine towards the front wheels, and then just over the front wheels there you've got the smoke box where the chimney is. And that's what we call a locomotive type boiler, because you look at a railway locomotive, that's the type of boiler they've got. As I say, Sentinels went for the vertical boiler. Quite interesting firing a Sentinel when you're on the road, because the firing hole is in the top of the boiler. And of course, as you know, heat rises, and so do flames. And you've got to get the lid off, chuck some more coal on and get the lid back on quick before you get burned. Now we've got one of our Showman's engines coming in. There's a Showman's tractor. This is Stuart Maggs with his example. And this one, little Garrett, built in 1917. The Showman's engines haul the heavy loads from town to town, village to village, and once the fair had arrived on the village green and was built up, the Showman's engine was then parked alongside one of the rides, and as I said, with the little miniature we had in, the miniature Foden wagon, a belt will be put round just in front of the chimney there. You can see the dynamo. That's the dynamo that generates the electricity. A belt would go round the flywheel and round that, and that engine would chug away all the time the fair was open. That would be chuffing away there, generating electricity to put lights on the ride and drive it as well. Being a road haulage engine, it also has extra water tanks. Where the driver is standing, he's actually standing on the water tank. On a railway locomotive, it's called the footplate. On a road-going vehicle, it's the man stand. And he's standing on the top of the water tank, but you'll notice, just in between the front and back wheels, there are two more tanks, one on each side of the boiler, which we call belly tanks. And these contain more water, so it doesn't mean when you're on the road, you don't have to stop quite so often to keep filling up with water. And the Showmans were quite hard-working engines. Now we have a Fowler agricultural engine. Fowlers were being built up in Leeds. John Fowler company, probably best known for building the very big ploughing engines. Well, they also made all manner of engines. This one's called Edna, and owned by Pete Lyons. Had this one quite a number of years now. Very typical of a Foden. Most of the Foden Fowler engines were always finished in black. Very typical of a Fowler being black and lined out. Very, very nice engine indeed. Used mainly for agricultural work, driving thrashing drums, hauling trailers, things like that. Now a little burrel. This is Lion, Lord of the Forest it used to be called. Burrels had their works at Beckford in Norfolk. Very tall chimney on this one because at one time this one actually had a canopy fitted to it. That's why it's got the taller chimney than it has now, they haven't put the canopy back on it. But this one spent most of its working life doing forestry work, or timber haulage, things like that. It's now been fitted with, like a lot of engines, been fitted with rubber tyres, but originally, of course, they would just be metal wheels with the angled straights going across the back wheels to give it grip.
Can I just interrupt, Brian, just briefly? Call for Mr. Ray Hill. Mr. Ray Hill, if you'd like to return to the shop, they have something of yours which is of value. Okay. Thank you, Brian.
Now the Marshall engine dated from 1886, very early engine. This one, Marshall's at Gainsborough in Lincolnshire. This one, it was supplied new to Seawards in Petersfield and worked with them for a great number of years before it sadly ended up sitting in a scrapyard, I believe. It was bought by a gentleman called Peter Fagg, who used to be involved with the Brighton and Hove engineering, for those of you who can remember when that was going. And Peter restored this engine and kept it for quite a number of years. And after a few years he decided to part with the engine, and it was bought by Lloyd and Wendy Wakelin, who are members of the Seaward family. They're descendants of the Seaward family. So basically it's gone back to its original owners. Very, very nicely restored engine. First of our road rollers is an Aveling and Porter. Dates from 1926. Aveling and Porters were built at Rochester, down in Kent. And probably road rollers were the last steam engines to be used commercially, really, because a lot of them were owned by local authorities, and because of their weird accountancy system, nothing is disposed of until its value gets down to zero. So you've got a lot of rollers remained in working use long after the rest of the steam had ended up sadly at the scrapyard. Another example now of an Aveling. And this one was a little bit later, 1902. A bit bigger machine, as you can see. And on this one, just behind the back wheel that's on your side, the outside of the arena, you can see another large device there with a wheel on, and this is called a scurrifier. And if you see as it goes around, in the back at the bottom there are two sort of squarish holes, and in there you would put some very, very large steel tines, and these could be lowered into the ground by that wheel that's on the side, and these would actually rip up the old road surface before you laid the new one. So quite a useful attachment to have on a roller. Makes it a dual purpose vehicle. It can rip up the road before it lays the new surface. Aveling and Porter again made all sorts of types of steam engine, but they're probably best known for their road rollers. They made more of them than anything else. Part of the Aveling works was still there in Rochester as part of the council offices, but sadly now that at the moment that whole lot's been demolished and it's a temporary car park. I've actually parked my car there. Very sad really when you think of that was the huge Aveling and Porter works and you're just parking a car there and the works is long gone. There's nothing survives of it at all. But it was actually Thomas Aveling that really was the person that made engines move and steer under their own power, because I mentioned about the portable engines when we had the miniatures in. The portable engines work like these did, but they had to be towed by a team of horses. And it was Thomas Evelyn that really got his head round the fact that by putting in some gearing and making a steering arrangement on the front, they could actually drive themselves along, which is exactly what they did, and how we see the engines now. Now, as I said, Sentinel and Foden were the main manufacturers of wagons, but there was another company up in Leeds called the Mann Company, and they also produced engines. They were not one of the biggest builders of engines by any means, but this particular one is a Mann steam wagon, very much a local engine. It was supplied to T. Frampton in Farnham, who was a haulage contractor, and one of his main contracts was moving furniture for Pimm's in North Street in Guildford. And that container on the back is what they call a lift-off container. Nowadays, container transport's quite commonplace, but in the early days, if you were moving a house, we'll just say you were moving from here in Singleton and you were going to move, we'll say to Guildford. Now, nowadays, the furniture van would come along and load all your goods in the furniture van and drive to Guildford. But in the days when steam moved things around, you would load your furniture into that container. That engine would probably go down to Chichester to the railway. And when it got to the railway goods yard, that container would be lifted off of the back of the man wagon and would be put onto a railway wagon. And that railway wagon would then go up to Guildford. And when you got to Guildford, that container with your furniture in and all your worldly goods would be lifted off, put back onto a wagon similar to this and delivered to your house. A little bit different to how we do things these days.